that would be an issue because there's just so many bodies in there.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's got to be some way that they handle that. Yeah. Sometimes I don't much think about it. You look good, mustard yellow.
Is this what it's supposed to look?
I like the mustard yellow.
I'm just ready for sweatshirt season. I could live in that.
You should be able to see yourself.
Over humidity now. I like no humidity and still like not winter,
Go,
but
Grab mom.
I
Ab,
don't want
Ab.
to.
will you sign in to the stream and see if you can see it?
Yeah, I just wake up and I'm like, might as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, then I sweat so bad. But every time I think of Indonesia and I'm like,
Yeah.
Oh,
like I'm not as hot as I was
Oh
there.
yeah,
so.
that's so true. Wearing long sleeves and pants.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's like compared to something here
Yeah.
for the 4 hours you have to wait out. You can go in your air
Right.
and you're so yeah. That gives good perspective.
Yeah. It does, because it's not there.
Every once in a while when I walk through somewhere, I smell that smell.
Yeah, it looks
It's just, all right,
Oh,
cool.
look at something. Smells nice.
yeah.
Smells good, like some type of poop or something.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I'm like, oh.
I was
our
thinking-
Indonesian girl this week.
You did? You did? Oh, you
No.
guys done that?
Mhm.
Yeah, we talked like try to like.
Oh wow.
She's works in global.
Do you? Oh, that's cool.
If I call her on my way to work, it's like dinner something.
Do you remember Dana?
Yeah.
She messaged me last week. She is starting a small business, and she's always funny. She's like,
Yeah.
her English isn't great, and she's just so cute when she talks. It's just funny.
Yeah.
And she was sending me all these pictures of like her business cards and all this stuff. She's like, I really need help to figure out how to word this better. I was like, okay, I'll try my best. Like, I don't have a small business, but I'll help you word it better in English.
Yeah.
But she said her little boy, you can make a picture of him, is in first grade.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
'cause she's back in Saudi Arabia.
But that she's on my phone that you're calling right now. They're in rainy season, but something's going on. Oh my gosh, he's huge.
I know.
Look at that hair. Yeah.
So
He's got a rolly backpack.
no.
I know. Yeah.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get going. Yeah, welcome to the chill hang version of Mosaic today. It's also like a Sanders list version of Mosaic, which we haven't had many of those. So it's kind of the equivalent to like letting the inmates run the prison a little bit. So we're gonna try not to break your church, Blake, if you're watching. Try to make sure it's here when you get back. But yeah, we're gonna talk about mercy today here in a little bit, and I totally whiffed on music, so I don't have any warm-up songs or anything like that. So you guys, if you want to like sing in your head a little bit from time to time, that's optional. But yeah, sorry about that. But we're gonna name the good here in just a second. Abby's gonna lead us through that. But we'll go ahead and get started. I'll open this up in prayer. Father God, we do just thank you for today. Thank you that we can gather together to just be with one another and to talk about our week and talk about the things that you're doing in our lives. And do pray for everything that's going on within our Mosaic family, new babies being born and people on the road and on the move, and new jobs and transitions and just the many other things that are going on. Pray to just be with each of those situations, be with each of us as we try to navigate through this crazy thing called life. We are just thankful that we get to live that together with other people, and thankful we get to live that with you walking along beside of us every step of the way. And so we love you. We thank you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, you want to?
So the time we end good. Sometimes we have a song before now, we don't. So yeah, just take a second and think about your week. Last Sunday to this Sunday, and what put wind in your sails, what maybe reminded you of God's grace and goodness, or what hard thing might you be walking through where you just got a glimmer of hope that you needed. We'd love to hear about that.
The floor is whoever's.
I think for me, so Kid Week is always like pretty exhausting, but I think like this morning, Kid was like, I was wanting to take a shower, so this morning Kid was like, mommy, 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 and he was just like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like tomorrow's Monday, I only have like one more day of this, which obviously then always brings like a huge sadness, but then I think too, I was just like, oh, like he doesn't know. This might be bad also. He doesn't really know the word no or like rejection yet, which is also kind of beautiful. And then it, like it reminded me of like the widow, or not, was the lady in the Bible that was like, it was just annoying.
Oh, the one, yeah, it wasn't
to
the
the
widow to
person.
the judge. And
Yes,
she
that was it, yeah. And I was like, oh, like Caleb and her and Addie and all kids. But I think that's like the beauty of kids is like just that remembering that it's like okay to keep asking and so their souls haven't been broken yet, which is beautiful. But then you're also like break soul. It's a weird tension. I'm not gonna lie, like I'll lean into that. But anyway, so it was a good thing. But I think for me, it's always just that, like kind of what Emily talked about last week, just that ache. So it's a good thing, but it's like so hard.
My good was Leah this week because we went apple picking at her parents. And if you've ever been to Leah's parents, which they have a fundraising race in July, so go. Either run it or volunteer. But it's like this vista. And it's almost like it stops you in your tracks because you're like, somebody gets to live here. And I think I told Leah, or I told Andy, I was like, I wonder if Caleb or Addie, like one day they'll realize like, wow, my grandparents live here. It's just amazing. And I get really excited about fruit. And there's everywhere. There's fruit trees, pear trees, apple trees. But it was just cool because the girls hadn't been together in a while. And like they just ran ahead. You didn't have to worry about them running into traffic. It's just this open space. It's wild and free. And I'm picking apples, which is just awesome. So, and we just hadn't gotten to hang out together that much. So that was very life-giving to me. And it was just like something that typically in the week, my family knows like once work's over, I just kind of want to curl up in a ball and die. And so the fact that I did something after work was extremely big for me. And so, we had that in soccer. It was life-giving instead of me being like, oh my gosh, I can't move another muscle. And so we had soccer and apple picking. It was awesome. And I wasn't happy. So. Good. Somebody else? I know about a lot of y'all's weeks. I'm just gonna name the good for y'all if y'all want to start naming it.
We went to the beach last week with my mom and stepdad, and it was just a fun time to spend time together and just kind of get away from the busyness of everything, and just sit and watch the ocean. We saw some guy catch a shark just right off the ocean right there. Didn't get back in the water after that. Here's a picture of it. It was a pretty good sized shark.
Water after that.
About 5 feet long.
Yeah.
Oh, significant.
Yes.
How did you catch it?
How big was
It's at least like 5 feet long.
it? Absolutely not. I'm 5 feet.
It's a human.
I mean, he like
I
got in
don't
the
think
water and had gloves on and like drug it out of the water.
That's gonna be enough.
Odd.
Sir, what else do you use your skills for?
Yeah, because it was too heavy, for the fishing line. So it got in the ocean and like drug him out.
And then what do you do with it?
Did he want to go back in the water? Has he never heard of?
Was it just a guy or was it like a
Doesn't he
lifeguard?
know?
or something?
No, I never heard.
Doing
Fishing,
Beach
huh?
goers.
Just beach goer.
Yeah,
That's
but
crazy.
that happened. That was kind of cool, but scary. But it was a good week, just relaxing and spending time with family, and I love the beach, so any chance I get, I will go. But it was nice. All right, let's go. Mosaic.
Maybe
Picture,
time to
Leah, wanna go?
Let's go.
Yeah, all right.
We will love it.
and a lot of
We got a
fancy
van.
food.
True. True.
You can sleep in them.
I've got a minivan.
I've seen the air mattress things that go up to like go over the back.
Oh,
yeah.
Make it,
Yeah, I'm like, we can do that.
That's pretty
that
big.
would be
It's fine.
vacation.
Let's just pile it in.
Who needs an
Great.
RV when you have a mini?
That's right.
Save on that mortgage.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of jellyfish.
Yeah, I love that.
But the food was great. Find a lot of joy and some good seafood.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Great. That's good. Yeah. All right, I'm hunting back to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, let's jump into the lesson, I guess we'll call it something like that. So we're going through the Beatitudes, and yeah, today we're talking about mercy. So yeah, it's a pretty it's a good one. I think all the Beatitudes are good. This Sermon on the Mount is probably my favorite section of the Bible, and then the Beatitudes within that section are just really, really powerful. So it's been fun just to walk through those as a group together, and then to come to this one. I think especially given what we talked about last week, I think these two really kind of hold each other really well together and balance in a really just beautiful way. So hopefully you guys can see that as we talk through some of that. So I did think too, just I didn't realize usually when I teach in like sections, or there's a story that we're reading through or something. So I don't know if I've ever done many sermons or lessons off of just one verse. So I was like, this is kind of hard, like to just like, how do you take this? And I didn't want to like just take it and go in 100 different directions. So try to stay on point, but also try to do it justice. It was a little bit of a challenge for me. So yeah, I like to ask questions, so I'm going to sprinkle this in. I'm used to doing this, so we'll see how it goes. What comes to your mind when you think of mercy? When you think of the word mercy? Just random thoughts, words, ideas.
Honestly, think of Mother Teresa.
Okay.
Her just like going around and, just taking care of people and sacrificing yourself to take care of others.
Okay. So there's like a servant leadership type thing to that. Yeah.
I was thinking of like, so my parents did like a couple of years of ATI, the Bill Gothard thing, and it's the Advanced Training Institute. They had a whole documentary on it called Training Happy People.
The Duggars.
Yeah, the
Oh,
Duggars thing,
okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to watch that.
Oh, okay.
You want to watch
Carving out time. Got it. Okay.
it.
Prepare
Also-
yourself.
Yeah.
You might want to take it in sections.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on.
And so they're like literally every time I think of mercy, I think like women have the gift of mercy and men have the gift of prophecy. So it's like
Have you do what?
women were always like a mercy. They have the gift of mercy. Men have the gift of prophecy. So literally, I'm like, oh, my mom's a mercy, and I'm like, wait a second, that was a false thing they told us.
That's right.
So
Wow.
it's not a great.
I'm living
shot.
proof that's not true.
Yeah, you'll understand more when you are. Like 3-4 years.
Yeah. There's definitely some gender specific. Yeah.
I don't ever think of a man when I think of mercy. Just saying.
Okay.
I mean, now probably, but
Yeah.
growing up, it was like very much like almost like a negative thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah. Especially if you go like to like my parents and grandparents beyond like their generations, like from like the, I'm sure further back too, but 30s to the probably 60s. You think of the woman being very modest and polite, hospitable, and then the man is more of the rugged caretaker. We had those gender roles were very defined back then, and they're much less defined, or maybe they're defined. The definitions have evolved since then beyond what we'd see then. So yeah, I see that. What else?
I don't remember where I read it, but I have this, as you said, that I just have this memory of reading, like in quiet time or something, and writing mercy triumphs over judgment. And that popped into my head. Because I remember like writing that down all pretty, making it look nice. And, but I just remember reading mercy triumphs over judgment.
Yeah, that's really good. Any other thoughts? When I was thinking through, I usually do this little like internal game of mine, where it's like, yeah, first thing that comes to mind, like first idea that pops in your head. So when I thought of mercy, first idea, Kevin will appreciate this, at least, maybe others. Thanos. Thanos came to mind, which of course, Marvel character, why not? So I had to look up the exact quote. I remember the movie that took place. I was like, I don't want to butcher the quote. So, but Thanos said, he's talking about the infinity stones that he's collecting. He said, with all 6 stones, I could simply snap my fingers. They would all cease to exist. So his goal was to wipe out half the population. They would all cease to exist. I call that mercy. And I was just like, that's a twisted way, Andy, to immediately think of that as being merciful. But if I really analyze, the character there for a second, like he genuinely thought that was an act of mercy to do that, to go through with that act, would be doing a big chunk of the population a favor. And so, but we all kind of see the red flag in that. And obviously, like you're sitting there in the movie or wherever you're watching, they're just like, that's not right. So we know that the idea of mercy sort of entails this idea that something's not right, right? Something's off, something's not right. And even the way that we see some people justify mercy can also be not right. And we'll talk just a little bit about kind of how maybe we as people, or even us as like a group as a church, like we've messed up in the name of trying to do merciful things. We've twisted and maybe distorted and made things worse. And so, so the Oxford definition, I think I'm going to set the sermon record today for definitions. So we'll just do a count. This is number 1. Oxford definition of mercy is compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. So compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. I think that last part especially kind of highlights what the act of mercy is, this idea of like, okay, there's a right here in a sense to exact kind of what Leah was talking about, justice, but there's another path that's being chosen. So, so within this definition, like what are the implications that we're going to talk about today? So there's going to be 2. I'm going to talk about mercy as being optional and mercy as being relational. So we're going to talk about both those implications today and what they kind of mean for us as individuals or as a church family. Before we jump into that, though, I want to quickly kind of recap the Beatitudes that we've discussed thus far, because this Beatitude sort of signals a shift in Jesus's target audience a little bit. It's subtle, but it's there. So Dallas Willard, very famous author, says that the Beatitudes are not a list of things to aspire to, but instead are pronouncements of God's blessings on all the people that the world thinks are missing out. So if we go back to the first few of those, the poor in spirit, we feel sorry for those people, right? If you're poor in spirit, you're lacking in spirit, in need of spirit. Think of those who are mourning. We obviously feel sorry for those who are experiencing mourning. Meekness is an implied kind of a weakness or a lack of strength in things. Again, we know that that's not the case, but those people are to look down on. And even last week's hunger and thirsting for righteousness, like that sounds at the surface like, okay, like their righteousness is good, but they're hungering and thirsting for it. So which implies that they're lacking in righteousness. They're in need of it. And so, so we often think that blessed means, or blessed means happy. So we think happy, Jesus is saying, happy are the poor in spirit, happy are the mourning. But that really doesn't hit at the heart of what Jesus is saying here. Like the better phrase that Marty Solomon, who's over the Bema podcast, says, phrase to use here is God's favor. When we think of it, instead of happiness, like God's favor is upon the poor in spirit, God's favor is upon the mourning, God's favor is upon the meek and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So and so Marty says basically the first half of the list of Beatitudes is for those who are experiencing brokenness. So again, think of those four things that we just mentioned. And the back half, where we're transitioning now, the back half of the list is when we try to reach out and minister to the brokenness. And so now that sort of aims to a different group in the audience. So they think of those who are in the audience that are just like, yeah, that's me, poor in spirit, and that's me, mourning. And so now he's looking to a group of people who are like out there trying to serve among those people, live among those people, engage those people. So what does it look like to engage someone who is poor in spirit, engage and relate to someone who's in the process of mourning? So the merciful, pure in heart, peacemakers, and persecuted, it's back in, are results and characteristics that we are faced with when we encounter the first part of that list. So yeah, when you come across somebody and think of individuals or even issues in our world that you would look at or see on television, just be like, this is wrong. Like this should not be this way, right? Or what this person's experiencing. My friend, my family member, this should not be. It does something to us, right? Like chances are, if we really let that in, or if it becomes, especially if it's personal to us, we can get pretty riled up. And I've had plenty of soapbox moments over the years where I'm just like, we've got to. I think of Abby too. Like she's I can't remember what started it, but years ago, like she came to me, she's like, Dick, did you know that so many women are sold into sex trading in these parts of the world, and why didn't I know about this? And like there's this thing that can happen to us when light is shed on an injustice, especially that we didn't know about. We can be shocked by it and then stirred to want to act. So so there's a sense of injustice that sort of spurs us into this area of mercy. And so the two things that I was going to talk about with mercy are mercy is optional and mercy is relational. So let's talk about the optional piece of that first. So what do I mean by that? Because that seems maybe kind of cruel if you just take it on service. But what I mean by that is to show mercy to someone implies that you have the option to do what? Like to not show mercy. Like there's a choice to be made. So that kind of separates, like, again, what we see in the back of this list, like the first part, like mourning and poor in spirit, they're more or less like basic characteristics and not choices. So the best way probably to explore this idea of like the choice is like, what would we call the opposite of mercy? Cruelty, yeah. Wrath. Judgment. There's one word in particular. You guys are right. Those are all examples. There's one word I'm looking for in particular. What? Punishment. You guys are all over it. Starts with a V. Vengeance. That's right. So yeah, all those hitting ultimately at the opposite of mercy, which would be vengeance. Definition of vengeance is punishment inflicted or retribution exacted for an injury or wrong. So again, like my mind goes to superheroes like Batman. Like he's out there fighting the crime, exacting vengeance. Death of his parents has spurred him to go out and like take take law and justice into his own hands. And so his whole character is personified by the idea of vengeance in this really gray area between like what's right and what's wrong. Is it okay to get in the way of the cops and all this stuff? So, um, um, but honestly, the reason that this is hard is because looking into the faces of those who are caught in situations of injustice can be very difficult to process, because it can be groups of people that we're very close to, because we can know names and faces of people that have been wrong or wronged. It can cause some of us to kind of block it out, shut it out entirely. Like we just can't bear, like there's always some things where I find myself drawn into, like, nope, I need to see this. I need to look at it. The Sarah McLachlan commercial comes on, like, look at the dog, look at it. It needs a home. And then there's other things I'm just like, I can't look at this. If it's an operating procedure, I turn it by and someone needs like some emergency surgery on those like warp channels that show that all the time. I'm just like, I can't watch that. Yeah. Like I can't watch that. I can't look at that. I can't, I have to block it out. I can't bear to take it all in, especially like, uh, yeah, uh, visibly take it in by any stretch. But instead of blocking it out, it could also send us in a different direction. It could cause us to become bitter and angry and resentful at the injustice that's taken place. It causes us to dwell and analyze. And if we're not careful, it can bring us to a place of vengeance, to where we actually want to hit back at the harm that's caused on others by exacting harm on those who are doing the harm. So, and then when that's the case, like if we're not careful, we become the very thing that we set out to stop, the very thing that caused us to be shocked and stunned at the beginning. So we do have a choice to make. We have a choice to exact revenge or choose a different path. So, what if instead of vengeance or hitting back, what if we showed compassion and forgiveness? And in Jason Miller's book, which is Will Blake's talked about, that kind of, I think, prompted this series through the Sermon on the Mount. He tells the story of an Israeli woman whose son entered the military at 18. I think you're required by law to go in the military at that age in Israel. So he was very torn about whether to go through with that. Obviously, didn't really have a choice, but was torn about the morality and the ethics of that, because he had seen how the Palestinian people had been treated in and around him, and it had caused him some problems. And so the idea of joining the military was causing him to fight through some of those conflicts. Like, do I want to be a part of some of the stuff that has caused me a lot of grief? But he did it and served his time, and then got called back to be as a reserve later on, and began to struggle all again with those same things. Like, do I really want to be a part of this? And eventually told his mom, like, hey, I think I can do this. I can be a part of the change. If I be a part of the army, then I can be a change, agent of change from the inside. While he was serving as a reserve, he was killed by a sniper, Palestinian sniper, and the Israeli government or army officials came to the door of the woman to tell her the news. And of course, it's a classic that you hear, like, you realize, like, when she opens the door, she knows exactly what's happened. And so they gave her the news, and her response to that news was to tell them, under no circumstances is anyone to be killed in the name of my son. And so, like, I read that and it just kind of like gives me chills now even saying it, because I was just like, holy cow, like, what are the implications of what she just did? Number one, I'm not sure I could do that. I'm pretty sure I might go the Batman route pretty quickly. But what she did was made sure that any violent retaliation stopped on her account. That whatever injustice had been done to her son that injustice did not continue in the name of her son. And so she made it a point to say, like, I am not going to be responsible for this continuing to the extent that she can help it. And obviously she can't stop the conflicts that are going on there as a whole, but she can stop her family and her own, indirect role in that. And so I just thought that was such a powerful example of mercy, and in ways that I've never been faced with at all. We can't always fix the problems of the world or the people affected by those problems, but we can prevent them from spreading on our account. So you're going to encounter situations, especially depending on how God's wired you, to where you're very sensitive to the wrongs of the world. And the older you get, I guess I'm probably the oldest person in this room. I don't know. Hey, you guys can tell me when you get to be in your 40s. I feel more acutely aware of it as I get older, of the haves and the have-nots, of those who were up here versus those who were down here, in the gap in between. And I find myself more and more and more getting, just being very sensitive toward those who have been stepped on or oppressed, and also very angry at those who are doing the oppressing. So it does not get easier, I don't think. So the challenge of mercy as being optional is always going to be there, because we're human and we want to right the wrongs, I think, that we see. We want to take it into our own hands sometimes, and that's it's a very difficult thing to stop. But we need to remember Marty's way of saying this, and that God's favor, Jesus saying, "Blessed, God's favor is on those who show mercy." God's favor, and this is where, again, I think as a whole, we've got so much opportunity as Christians to really shine a positive light here. And again, it's easy for me. I think I'm trying to work on this, but it's easy for me to see the problem more so the solution sometimes. So take this for what it's worth, but I feel like we've had so many times to stop hateful acts, hateful movements, hateful systems that oppress people. And sometimes we just sit the whole thing out. We just stay completely silent on it. Don't have anything to say. Other times, we've even jumped in and added to the oppressing and the harm. And I think of slavery being a big shining example of that, of once upon a time, we used to use the Bible to justify and support slavery. You think about that now, it's how could that ever happen? We would never, anybody would walk in here, we would never be oh yeah, this is, it's here. So, but once upon a time, that's where we were. And we stood behind the word of God in order to justify it. And I think that needs to probably teach us a posture of humility a little bit. It needs to teach us a posture of humility a little bit, because those blind spots will always exist so long as we're on this earth. And so are there other ways, even now, that we think we might be standing up for something, but we might actually be systematically oppressing or harming groups of people, or people that are seen as marginalized or outcast? Because God's favor rests on those people. Those are people, I would say one of the major themes of the Bible is that God cares about people, and that we, therefore, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, need to be people that care about people. And so we need to find ourselves if we're going to err, we err on the side of caring for people. I mean, it's a safe place to go. I know there's a ton of discussion that could go on that. We could probably spend so much time talking about the implications of that. And obviously any theme like that we draw can be abused or taken too far in ways. And I'm not saying that we ignore all of these other things and we just, whatever it takes, you care for people and ignore, doctrine or theology. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, if our theology or doctrine is harming others, then like, did we get that theology or doctrine right? And if so, like how? So we just need to hold that posture a little more loosely because could be wrong. Could be wrong. So the other aspect is mercy is relational. So talk about mercy being optional. Mercy is relational. So here's the thing. Um, this whole idea of mercy can be bigger than our principles, bigger than our theology, politics, or whatever's driving the acts that might be harming or oppressing others. It is about people. And mercy is a very relational thing. Like when we show mercy to someone, we're showing mercy to another human being. If I show that to Jordan, I'm showing mercy to another human being of God's creation, and that's deserving of love, forgiveness, and compassion. Just like I would hope that she would return the same to me. And when that's our posture toward one another, I think something really beautiful happens. So mercy acknowledges what each of us have in common, no matter the differences, and that's our humanity. Again, that we're created by God. Behind every human being, from the best of us, think of the best human being you can think of, to the worst of us. Think of the worst human being you can think of. Like, we're still human beings, and we're still, um, I think I've talked about this in other places. Like, I love seeing the movies and shows that show the complexity of human nature, that we're so used to putting like good guys versus bad guys, and the good guys are, always do good, the bad guys always do bad. But to me, the movies and shows that always stand out to me the most are the ones that show the complexities, the one where the good guys don't always make the right decision and the bad guys don't always they're not always bad 24 hours a day. They're not always plotting evil. They have moments where they care for their family, they share a meal together or something like that, and you're just like, oh. But that's life. Like, it's easy for us to just maybe walk away and settle the matter if we just put people in terms of good people, bad people. Jordan's in the good camp, Andrew's in the bad camp, something like that. You're not. I say that because I know that you're not. We all know that Andrew's the best. But it's easier for us to just walk away with those kind of labels and not have to think about it. But when I see Andrew do something good, it startles me. I'm like, well, this doesn't jive with all of the preconceived notions that I had about Andrew before that. Now, what do I do? Is he good or is he bad? And is it this or is it that? And we're forced to have to weigh those things together. And then maybe because we like to be the ones that exact justice in the world, maybe the moral of the story is that we should leave that to God, right? That we should let him sort out who's what, and we should maybe be holding and worrying about some lesser things rather than what somebody is or isn't at the end of the day. Another thing that can trip us up in this area is our pride. And doesn't this always seem to be the case, that our pride can get in the way of pretty much anything? Showing mercy, in a sense, can be what we call like taking the high road. Like, if I show Jordan mercy in some area, I could just be like, yeah, I know, look what I did. Like, she was really deserving because she took all the Dr. Peppers in my refrigerator, and now but I forgave her, and not only that, I told her that she didn't have to pay me back. Like, what a good human being am I for being able to take the hit. And we think like that's a good thing, right? To take the high road, like that's what we're supposed to do. But that's where I think like the ultimate, the best part of this verse is the reward that Jesus says is for showing mercy. And what is the reward for showing mercy?
Mercy.
Yeah, you get mercy back. So your reward for showing mercy is mercy. Is at the end of the day, Jesus recognizes that there's a little bit of a circular pattern here, that we're all in need of it. Every one of us, from like the best of us to the worst of it. None of us, whether you took all the Dr. Peppers or not, you did something at some point in your life. You've harmed somebody, you've messed up and done something that either you didn't, either it was intentional or not. But all of us are in need of forgiveness and compassion, generosity. And so the reward for mercy is mercy. Like we give mercy and we get mercy. And I think that's a beautiful thing to live. And really it's almost like that circular pattern that I would talk about like in marriage counseling a lot, of this idea of like, okay, it works best when you're loving that person, for you're looking after them and they're looking after you. Like the minute you turn on yourself and you start looking out for your own needs, it all breaks down. But if I'm looking out for Abby, Abby's looking out for me, then this little thing happens and our needs get met, not because we're looking out for ourselves, but because the other person's looking out for us. And it's the same kind of mentality of like we give mercy and we get mercy. And if we are people that consistently practice mercy, and if that's what we're known for, can be known for in this world, in this, for us specifically, in this area, in our circles that we walk in, like then we're going to get mercy in return. Like that's a cool reward for that. Like I don't know about you guys, like I need mercy badly. I screw up quite a bit on a daily basis, and so to know that I'm going to get mercy in return for giving mercy is I just think a very rich reward. So, just to wrap this up, I wanted to share just some conclusions that Jason Miller, again from the what's the book called? When the World Breaks. Yeah, When the World Breaks. That he took from this chapter. It's a great chapter. If you guys don't have the book, I encourage you to read that, get that, and read this chapter. It's great. He says, sometimes we look at the world around us and conclude things shouldn't be this way. It's okay for us to admit that. Like we don't live. It's an old movie, old Reese Witherspoon movie called Pleasantville. You haven't seen that? It's a really good movie. It's so cool. Like it takes place mostly in black and white. Because these people live like in a fantasy land where nothing can go wrong. And there's a fun scene too, like where the kids are all playing basketball in the gym and everybody shoots a shot at once and all the shots go in. It's like there's nothing that ever goes wrong. And then something happens in the city, and it like sin kind of enters the town, brokenness, and it begins to turn color. And so you can begin to see the people who have messed up or done wrong by who's black and white and who's color. So it's okay to look around and conclude that, okay, things shouldn't be this way. There's some wrong. There's some wrong in the world. There's some things that shouldn't be. It's okay. Like you turn on the news or, listen to the Pour Over podcast or wherever you get your information and be like, this is crazy. Like that this is happening. And it probably is crazy. Like we live in a wild time right now. It's okay for us to admit that. Two, vengeance so easily cloaks itself in the guise of justice that we don't often know the difference. But the energy that drives vengeance is dark. And so vengeance and vengeance and mercy can often look very close together. Like I said, Thanos was really convinced that what he was doing was an act of mercy, but there was a drive, a motivator behind his intentions that was very dark, and he couldn't see it, but everybody, a lot of people around him could. So there was something wrong there. Number three, we're never more certain of our own righteousness than when we know that we've been wronged. So if we personalize this and realize, like, okay, what are examples in your life where you feel like you were oppressed, that you were wronged, that you were shut out, kicked out, or cut off? How'd you feel? What did you want to do? How did you want to react? And in those moments, especially for me, I know for me, like I wanted so badly to hit back, not in a violent way, but man, the number of times I would say things like, oh, if I could just get this person in a room, for a couple hours and just tell them this, tell them that, and, really put them in their place. Like, that's countless times I would want to do that. So we're never more certain of our own righteousness than when we know that we've been wronged. Number 4, pretty much every time it comes up, the teaching to forgive is built on the idea that we share with our offenders a dependence on mercy. This is in the Bible. So the logic of forgiveness, of generously extending mercy to someone, is that we're fundamentally in the same boat with the people over whom we stand in judgment. And so really, we've got to do a better job at sort of breaking down these hierarchies ourselves that we can put ourselves on of, okay, this person did me wrong. Therefore, we put them down here and we put us up here. We're better than them. And so, so this idea of forgiveness is dependent on mercy because we're all in need of it. And if we can put ourselves in the same boat as everyone else and recognize, and we're all in need of some generosity, some compassion and forgiveness, like it'll help us to be able to even out some of those moments where we can get bitter, angry, or frustrated. I get it. And it doesn't mean, again, like a lot of times we can get angry because we've seen this abused, by people that we trust or people that we count on, like spiritual authorities or parental authorities, figures. Like we see things get done in the name of good things, but we see stuff get twisted and it can mess us up. So I get that. Like that is hard to deal with, but we have to be the agent to the best that we can of change. So like that Israeli woman said, like, no more bloodshed in the name of my son. Like that's it. We cut it off. Like we say, not we be the thing that stops the chain reaction from continuing. And then the last thing that Jason says is there's no future without all of us. This doesn't mean you shouldn't have good boundaries. This doesn't mean we shouldn't protest and protect ourselves. But it does mean that as long as we believe that those people are the problem, rather than remembering that we share a common, in common a problem that those people that are acting out right now will likely keep breaking the world. So at some point, we've got to stop looking at who's right, who's wrong, and begin to see that we all share something in common. We all share a need to give mercy and need to receive mercy. Jason says, if we don't do that, we're likely going to keep breaking the world. So that is all I have for mercy. So thanks for listening. And I'll close this out in prayer. Father God, we do thank you for your mercy. We do we acknowledge that we do look on this world and see it in all of its complexity, and we see some tough things, and we see some and have been a part of some tough things ourselves, most likely things that we would consider wrong or unjust, done by people that we would consider less than good, or unjust people. And so we pray that you help us to do our best, and being able to learn this path of mercy and forgiveness, showing compassion and care, of breaking chains of injustice, as individuals, as families, as a church family, and as a greater global church as a whole, that we can be people known for mercy. And God, help us to see ways in our own lives that we can take steps in the right direction toward that. Thank you for your own forgiveness in our lives and the ways that you've done that above and beyond what we deserve and can ask for. So we thank you for that. We thank you that you love us and that you care for us, and that you've modeled this way of mercy for us in such a way that we don't have to look very far to go guessing what that looks like. So to be with us as we go throughout the rest of our week. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. I don't have any announcements because I'm not that guy. But does anybody have any announcements or any just final thoughts or?
Just check the milk train for
Yeah.
Taylor Blake. If you haven't signed up and you can, that'd be great. If you can. I sent out the kid list last night through right before Thanksgiving. So if you have a conflict, just please check with somebody, try to get it flip flopped, and update us. And if somebody's not on the list that wants to be on the list, just let us know.
All right.
Thursday night, I don't know if we're doing dinner or not.
I'm sure
Friday.
they'll text out.
Okay.
So. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. That's it.